I arrived early, because I always do. The habit came from years of being told to be responsible, to not inconvenience anyone, to make myself small enough to fit wherever I was allowed. The hall smelled like fresh polish and artificial flowers, the kind meant to look celebratory but somehow always felt borrowed. Rows of white chairs stood in perfect lines, facing the small stage I had paid for with months of overtime shifts and skipped weekends. I smoothed my graduation dress with trembling hands. It wasn't extravagant, nothing in my life ever was, but it was mine. I imagined my mother sitting in the front row, dabbing her eyes. My father standing slightly to the side, pretending not to be emotional. My brother clapping loudly, stealing attention without trying. I imagined applause. Laughter. Proof that I mattered. The clock ticked forward. 5 minutes past the start time, the hall was still empty. 10 minutes. I checked my phone, the screen lighting up my face in the echoing quiet. No missed calls. No messages. Just silence so loud it pressed against my chest until breathing felt like work. That's when my uncle walked in, already holding his phone up. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask where everyone was. He just laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls, and said loudly for the camera, "Ladies and gentlemen, a graduation with 0 guests." The words landed harder than any slap ever could. I smiled automatically, the way I've been trained to do when I'm embarrassed. My eyes burned, but I refused to let tears fall, not here, not on video, not for someone else's amusement. My phone buzzed. "Mom, we're at your brother's housewarming. Don't be salty, love you." I read it twice, then a third time, trying to find the part where she realized what day it was. Trying to find myself in the message somewhere. Another buzz followed almost immediately. "Dad, catering's on your card, just $5,600, I forgot mine." I stared at the number. $5,600. I thought about the months I worked late, the meals I skipped, the shoes I didn't buy. I thought about the untouched food waiting in warming trays behind the stage, meant for guests who never came. I said nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why my life events were always optional. I sent a thumbs up emoji. Thumbs up. The simplest response. The safest one. The one that never started fights or demanded explanations. The one I had mastered. The hall remained empty. The chairs stayed pristine. My name was called anyway, my footsteps echoing as I walked across the stage alone. No applause. Just the quiet hum of the lights above me and my uncle's camera still recording. As I held the certificate, I realized something slowly, painfully clearly. This wasn't a forgotten day. This was a chosen absence. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt done. They always said I was the strong one. Not in the way people mean it as praise, but in the way they use it as permission to forget you. Strength, in my family, meant I didn't need checking in on. It meant my disappointments were expected to be handled privately, quietly, preferably without making anyone uncomfortable. My brother, on the other hand, was celebrated for breathing. I remember the first time I noticed the difference. I was 12, sitting at the kitchen table with a report card full of A's. My mother glanced at it for less than a second before smiling at my brother, who had just announced he passed a class he'd been failing all year. The room erupted in congratulations. Cake was bought. Photos were taken. My report card slid under a stack of mail, forgotten before dinner. It never stopped. When he dropped out of college, they said he was finding himself. When I worked 2 jobs to pay my tuition, they said I was independent. When he needed help, everyone showed up. When I needed anything, I was told I'd figure it out, I always did. The housewarming was just the latest version of an old story. I pictured them now, standing in my brother's brand new living room, admiring walls he didn't pay for and furniture he didn't assemble. I imagined my mother rearranging decorations she hadn't lifted a finger to buy, my father pouring drinks with the ease of someone who'd never worried about money leaving his account. And I knew, without asking, that the food on their plates was the catering I'd ordered for my graduation. I remembered being 16 and needing money for a school trip. My parents told me it wasn't in the budget. 2 weeks later, my brother got a new car. He needs it, they said. You understand. I always understood. Understanding became my curse. It taught them I would bend without breaking, that I would shrink to fill the space they left empty. Every milestone of mine was treated like an inconvenience that needed rescheduling around my brother's life. My graduation wasn't forgotten. It was deprioritized. As I sat alone in the empty hall, still wearing the dress meant for family photos that would never exist, I realized how carefully they had trained me. They taught me to accept less without complaint. To smile through neglect. To be grateful for scraps of attention. But something had shifted. Because this time, the neglect was undeniable. This time, there was proof: rows of empty chairs, a silent stage, a bank notification showing money leaving my account while I sat alone. For the first time, I let myself feel the anger I had buried for years. Not loud, not explosive, but sharp and focused, like a blade finally removed from its sheath. They were all together, celebrating him, in a house built on support I never received. And I was alone, finally seeing the pattern for what it was. I didn't want an apology. I wanted acknowledgement. And if they wouldn't come to my milestone, then I would make sure my absence became something they couldn't ignore. I didn't leave the hall right away. I sat in one of the empty chairs, the kind meant for proud parents, and let the quiet settle into my bones. Anger had come and gone, leaving something steadier behind. I realized I didn't want to scream or confront anyone. I didn't want explanations wrapped in excuses or apologies rushed out of guilt. I wanted them to see. I opened my phone and scrolled through photos from the graduation, pictures taken by my uncle, of all people. Me standing alone on a stage. Me smiling too hard. Rows of chairs untouched. Evidence. Proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a scheduling conflict. This was a choice. An idea formed slowly, calmly. I opened a delivery app. My fingers didn't shake. I typed in my brother's new address, the one my mother had sent proudly in the family group chat weeks ago, asking me if I could chip in for a housewarming gift. I selected a large, expensive arrangement. Something impossible to ignore. Something that would arrive while they were all together. I added a note. I read it 3 times before sending. Not to soften it, but to make sure it was honest. No insults. No accusations. Just facts. I imagined the doorbell ringing. My brother answering with a grin, expecting another congratulatory gift. My parents standing behind him, smiling, already prepared to thank me for my generosity. I imagined the way their faces would change as the note was unfolded, the words sinking in one by one. I paid without hesitation. The money was already gone anyway. I left the hall then, carrying my certificate under my arm like something fragile. I changed out of my graduation dress in the bathroom, folding it carefully as if it had served its purpose. In a way, it had. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed. Once. Twice. 3 times. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the confusion or the sudden concern. I didn't want to be interrupted by guilt masquerading as love. For once, I wanted them to sit with the discomfort I had lived with my entire life. More calls followed. My mother. My father. Even my brother, whose number I rarely saw on my screen unless he needed something. I turned the phone face down. For the first time, silence felt powerful. I imagined them standing in that living room, surrounded by new walls and borrowed pride, finally confronted with the cost of their choices. Not just the money, but the absence. The empty hall. The daughter they left alone on a day meant to celebrate her. The delivery wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. I drove home slowly, letting the weight lift from my chest with each mile. I didn't know what would happen next, if there would be apologies or anger or attempts to explain it all away. But I knew this. They could no longer pretend they didn't know. And I no longer needed them to understand. Because for the first time I had chosen myself, and that felt better than any applause ever could. The calls didn't stop that night. They came in waves, missed calls stacking on my screen like evidence of sudden concern. My mother first, then my father, then my brother again, as if repeating my name enough times would summon the version of me who always answered, always explained, always forgave. I let the phone ring. Not out of spite. Not to punish them. But because I needed to hear my own thoughts for once, uninterrupted by their voices rewriting history. I made myself dinner when I got home, something simple, eaten at the counter. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt intentional, not lonely. I placed my graduation certificate on the table and looked at my name printed there, proof that I had done something hard, something real, without an audience. I thought about how many moments in my life had passed like this, uncelebrated. How often I had waited for someone else to validate my achievements before allowing myself pride. And how that waiting had trained me to believe I was only worthy when someone else noticed. The phone buzzed again. A text from my mother this time. Why didn't you tell us it meant so much to you? I stared at the words for a long time. I almost laughed. I had told them. In invitations sent weeks early. In reminders. In conversations where I mentioned dates and times, hoping someone would pause long enough to listen. What she really meant was, why didn't you make it easier for us to choose you? I didn't reply. Another message followed, this one from my father, we didn't realize you were upset. That one hurt more than the rest, because it revealed the truth, they hadn't realized, because they hadn't looked. My brother finally left a voicemail. His voice was unsteady, confused. I didn't know, he said. I thought you were okay with it. I deleted it without responding. Because I had been okay with it. 4 years. And that was the problem. That night, I hung my graduation dress in the back of my closet. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and climbed into bed knowing tomorrow would come whether they understood or not. And for once, that was enough. In the days that followed, apologies arrived wrapped in explanations. They wanted conversations. Closure. Forgiveness on their timeline. I offered something different, distance. Boundaries. A new version of myself they hadn't earned yet. I didn't stop loving them. I stopped sacrificing myself to prove it. Graduation had come and gone without applause, but it had given me something better, clarity. I no longer needed to beg for a seat in rooms that never made space for me. My silence had spoken louder than any argument ever could. And in that quiet, I finally learned how to stand, fully, unapologetically, on my own.